Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Welcome to episode 82 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the Observer's Notebook, and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thank you for downloading and listening. The Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomenon, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, also known as the Strolling Astronomer. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. It really does. I got to emphasize that, okay? If you enjoy what you hear on the podcast and you like the content and you want to keep coming, because right now we have a few donors to the Patreon, which I totally appreciate, but we need more to really keep this thing going. You can help us out by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you get early access to the podcast before it goes public. If you can give $10 a month, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook, which is the handbook for the ALPO training program that I wrote. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast, and we'll also throw in a year's membership to the ALPO. You can help us out. If you're interested, go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Observer's Notebook. And if you want to join the ALPO, it's only $18 a year. What's that, 2 cups of coffee? Come on, join us. You can join us. Just go to alpo-astronomy.org. And we're also on the Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy up there at the top, little blue search field. And also the podcast has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. If you enjoy what you hear on the podcast, please subscribe. You can do that on iTunes. You'll never miss another episode. And now, episode 82 with Rik Hill. Coming back again, but this time we learn all about him in a member profile. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Observer's Notebook podcast. We have a repeat guest on the podcast today. It's Rik Hill from our solar section. Welcome to the podcast, Rik.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, why don't you give everybody a little 2-minute introduction to yourself?
I started in astronomy in 1957. No, not Sputnik. I started months before Sputnik with the transit of Mercury. And a teacher brought a little 1.6-inch unitron to school, showed us the sun. She had the wrong day because she did the UT conversion wrong. But there were sunspots on the sun, and that just really fired my imagination, and I was off and running at that point. And later on in my life, I went to Kitt Peak, worked on the Burrow-Schmidt telescope. That job lasted 12 years, and funding ran out.
Now, the Schmidt telescope, was that big white one with the curved bottom and that I used to see on photographs?
It's the telescope itself is blue.
Oh, okay.
It's over the parking lot at Kitt Peak. When you're in the parking lot, you look up to the west, and there's an observatory with a little house next to it. I lived in that house.
Really?
2 weeks a month. So I worked there for 12 years, and then after that, I snagged a job with Lunar Planetary Lab, originally working in planetary atmospheres and planetary occultations, 2 separate groups. When you're in astronomy, sometimes you put your job together by working for different groups. And then after those, the funding ran out on those. I worked for Catalina Sky Survey starting in the year 2000.
Oh, okay.
Right up to the end of my career in 2017.
Now, what did you do at Kitt Peak?
At Kitt Peak, I ran the observatory. The astronomers were at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. So they would send me their request. Sometimes the requests were literally laid out plans for doing the whole sky in a certain wavelength, and I would just pick the areas where I was going to work and which survey I was going to work on a given night, based on seeing and availability of plates. Believe it or not, that was back in the plates days. It was the end of photographic astronomy. And then I would send the data back to Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. And then Lunar Planetary Lab, what was your function there?
Well, originally I was hired. They were worried how long I would stay on. In my job interview, they said, well, what is your commitment to this job? How long do you think you'll be able to stay? And I said, as long as the paychecks keep coming in. But originally I worked with planetary atmospheres. We analyzed the lunar atmosphere, very tenuous atmosphere, as you might imagine, of refractory elements like calcium and potassium. And then we also worked on Mars water vapor, measuring the micrometers of water in the Martian atmosphere in a column you're looking through. That was fun. That was fun. We got to where we could measure 1/10 of a micron of water in the entire column over a given spot on Mars.
Oh my goodness!
And well, that job ended. Mars Polar Lander had an instrument on it that would measure directly that water vapor. And when it crashed, we no longer had anything that was going to give us a 0 point to compare our 10 years of observations to. And so the job literally ended that day.
Oh.
Well, I knew
I was at JPL that day too for the landing. It was
Catalina Sky Survey was after me to work for them because I had worked on Schmidt telescopes and was familiar with them. I was an optician before I was an astronomer, and I actually built Schmidts. So I went down the hall to Catalina Sky Survey. I said, "You guys still want me?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, you got me." And I was out of work for about 20 minutes.
Now, tell our listeners what the Catalina Sky Survey is.
Catalina Sky Survey is the premier asteroid survey for finding near-Earth asteroids. I will use it in the present tense, but I would say we find more NEOs than any other survey out there, including LSST or Pan-STARRS. And in terms of asteroids themselves, we literally have found over 100,000 asteroids.
Wow.
And now that I'm retired, I get to name them.
Yes, you do. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's right. I did one for you. That's right.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. That was quite the honor. Yeah.
Yeah. The big holdup with that right now is the IAU.
Mm-hmm.
They are very slow right now in responding to citations, proposed citations. And I think the reason why is I think some of the other surveys are sending in like 100 at a time or something.
Oh, wow.
And it's a voting system where they have to go on the website and they have to vote yes or no on whether a citation is worthy.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad they voted yes. So, talking about you a little bit, did a person or event spark your initial interest in astronomy?
Well, like I say, the substitute teacher brought that little 1.6-inch telescope and showed me the sun. That really fired me.
Okay.
I was all dinosaurs and fossils up to that point. I still am largely into fossils. Half my garage is fossils from all over the world. So my father saw that spark in me, took me to a couple of star parties in Detroit. At the time, the school I went to was a little each room, and he took me to a couple of star parties where I got to see other telescopes, which looked all like Mount Palomar to me. And after that, I got my own 2.4-inch, ubiquitous 2.4-inch telescope. Sometime around 1960 or 61, bought it from J.L. Hudson's in Detroit. And I used that until I bought a RV6 in 1965. So many amateurs had RV6.
Yep, I did. I started off with a 60 millimeter refractor, and I went to an RV6 after that.
Yep. It's a very common story. And then got out of the Navy. I sold the RV6 to buy a different telescope, and I sold it to this young 16-year-old girl. And we've been married for 45 years now.
Awesome. That's great. So,
well, you just don't give up an RV6 that easy.
You have custody of the RV6 still.
And she's got a lifetime maintenance contract.
That's good. I love it. That's a great little. I wish I had sold mine when I did. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah. But
yeah, Ken Wilson, an astronomer in Virginia, same kind of story. He sold his, wished he didn't, and worked. Rich Kowalski also had one. You know Rich Kowalski from the asteroids that actually were found and impacted the Earth.
Right.
Yeah, he sold his RV6 and went out and was always regretting it afterwards.
Yeah. It's a common story. It's funny how many people I interview for this podcast too. They started with a 60 millimeter refractor. It's really funny. Now, what if I were to say, what would be your dream telescope?
What would be my dream telescope?
Yeah.
Well, this 8-inch TEC that I have, it's an F20 Maksutov Cassegrain. It's pretty hard to beat that aperture for aperture. But if I could have I'd love to have a 12-inch version of that.
Oh yeah.
The images coming out of that telescope are spectacular. I'm not sure my sight would be worthy of a 12-inch aperture. I had a C14, and I was using the Questar one night, and I noticed the Questar images were almost as good as the C14. And it kind of made me scratch my head, so I spent a few months making masks for the C14 and checking on what happens at different apertures.
Right.
And it turned out I kind of maxed out around 8 inches, 9 inches for my sight. That beyond that, you didn't get any more resolution. You just got a brighter image that was fuzzier.
Oh, my goodness.
So I went and got rid of the C14, got the 8-inch, and I'm resolving 1 kilometer on the moon, just as I did with the C14. That's what I'm able to do with the 8-inch.
Yeah, I recently got a 6-inch Mac Cassegrain from Explore Scientific, and I've seen Jupiter and Saturn through a number of different telescopes in my life. This thing I'm calling a planet killer. It's given me some of the best resolution I've ever seen.
Oh, they're almost as good as a refractor, except that you don't have something to gauge the wind.
Yeah.
That's a big problem in the desert here.
Yeah. Now, are you close to Phoenix? Is that where you are?
I'm in Tucson.
Tucson. Okay.
I'm about 50 miles north of the border.
Okay. All right. Great. So, what is your current equipment? What do you have? You mentioned a couple.
Oh my gosh, I have too much because my wife has been buying up telescopes at garage sales and thrift shops.
Really?
Yes, we got one bedroom that's just all telescopes. But I give them away to kids. When at Halloween, I take telescopes out in front of the house. They have to look through the telescope before they can get their candy.
Awesome.
And occasionally I have parents come up to me and say, where can I get something like this? And I will tell them a local telescope shop that sells a lot of used telescopes. Mm-hmm. And I tell them to go there because they can save some money. And if they really can't handle that, I say, come see me. And we'll set them up with a telescope.
Good job, man. That's awesome.
And there's a lot of them out there that are just going to waste in the front hall closet. So for myself, the big one for me is the 8-inch TEC. That's on wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And my observatory is a roll-out observatory. I just open the doors, the double doors, and roll the telescope out, because here in the desert with the heating, the daytime heating, we're still getting 100-degree temperatures right now. And with the daytime heating that we get, it can get up to 130 in the observatory, and you really need to get away from the heat of the observatory. They have a saying that I learned up on Kitt Peak, and that is, good domes are a good way to trap bad seeing.
That's true.
And so you get out in the open, and it works much better. Roll-off roofs are very popular here.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one at my last house. So that's the main instrument for me. And then I have also the 4-inch Celestron Maksutov. Wonderful scope, excellent images. And I have the Questar. And then there's Dolores's RV6. And we have a plethora of other telescopes.
Great. Now, other than the sun, what are some of your go-to things you observe?
Oh, lunar and planetary and solar.
Okay.
That's it. I do also try to include one double star every night before I quit.
And you post a lot of these images on Facebook as well.
Yes, I put some of those. I have imaged down to 0.5 arc seconds with the 8-inch. At 0.5 arc seconds, you get a double-lobed image. It's not separated, completely separated.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's a nice scope. It really is. And I can't, the fellow that made it, he's Yuri Petrinin. He's the optician for TEC. He is TEC. And he's up in Colorado. And when Chelyabinsk, the meteorite that fell on Chelyabinsk,
mm-hmm.
He sent me an email that day. He says, "That's my hometown." and so he was sending me videos from there and translating them. And it was a pretty exciting time.
Wow. Now, what brought you to the ALPO?
Oh, gosh. I'd known about the ALPO since 1965 when I wrote Walter.
Mm-hmm.
But the military intervened. When I got out of high school, I was a poor student in high school because I would come home and instead of doing homework, I'd throw my books on my desk and I'd plop on the bed with a sky and telescope or an astronomy book. I wasn't motivated to do my classes. I was reading astronomy all the time. So I graduated with a very poor average, and consequently, Lyndon Johnson sent me a telegram about a month after I was out of high school, and I didn't want to go in the Army, so I joined the Navy for 4 years instead. And so I didn't get serious about the ALPO till after I got out of the Navy, married Dolores, and we went to the Kutztown meeting, AL meeting in 1975. And that's when I joined the ALPO and the AVSO.
Oh, okay. Now, what did you do in the Navy?
In the Navy, I was a radar tech.
Okay.
Went to Double E school down in San Diego, then radar school on Treasure Island, and then they shipped me all the way to the other side of the country. I thought I was headed for Vietnam on an aircraft carrier or something, but instead they shipped me all the way across the country to Norfolk, Virginia, and I wound up fighting the Vietnam War in the Mediterranean Ocean.
Oh my God! Well, that's a good gig.
Yeah, just the luck of the orders. I mean, I had no control over it.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Wow. So you're now the solar section coordinator for the ALPO. How did that come about?
Walter Haas in 1982 sent out a questionnaire. He wanted to gauge where the organization was. So one of the questions was, do you think we ought to study the sun or something to that effect? And I responded enthusiastically that I thought that was true because I'd been observing the sun since 1963 with my 2.4-inch refractor and the eyepiece filter that you screw on the eyepiece.
Right. Oof.
I used those a lot.
Yeah, I did too. Ugh.
And that was something I had done for years and years and years. And so he said, well, since you're so enthusiastic, you want to start it up. I said, oh, sure. I mean, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And so I started the solar section back in 1982, and I ran it till 2004, one full magnetic solar cycle. And then it had several other recorders. Well, I would say coordinators, knee recorders. And then I took it back over after I retired when I had more time on my hands.
Okay. And your hometown, you said Detroit's your hometown?
Detroit was where I was born and raised. But let's face it, I've been living in Tucson for 40 years now.
Oh, okay.
This is my hometown.
Okay. And so the Lunar Planetary Lab brought you there basically for work?
No.
Or
What brought me here was the job at Kitt Peak.
Yeah. Okay.
And that lasted for 12 years.
That's nice.
Jobs in astronomy run out due to funding. And so that's how it works in astronomy. I mean, there's no other way to say it.
All right. Are you a member of any local astronomy clubs?
Yes, I am. The Tucson Amateur Astronomical Association here in Tucson.
Now, are you very active in the group, or?
Not really. They've got a lot of really high quality amateur astronomers. They really don't need to hear from me. If they ask me for something, I usually produce it. And Dolores often provides meeting space for them over at the Lunar Planetary Lab.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Now, how are your skies in Tucson?
Touchy issue. I've been losing about 1/10 of a magnitude every 2 years since I moved in here 25 years ago into this house. So Milky Way is just barely visible now.
Oh, my.
For lunar, planetary, and solar, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I could do with better seeing, but that's all a function of local asphalt. It really is. I can map areas of my sky, like Jupiter right now, being at the low declination it's at. Mm-hmm. If it gets too far west of the meridian, there's the conjunction of two streets over in the southwest from me. And where they meet up is a large cul-de-sac, which is a big island of asphalt. And I definitely see bad seeing over that.
Yeah, and with the heat of the summer, too, it's just radiation.
Oh, yeah.
Not fun.
It's not unusual for the temperature gradient from your feet to your head to be as much as 50, 60 degrees.
Yeah. Wow. Now, do you have any interest outside of astronomy? You mentioned you're kind of a rock hound.
Oh, yes. Paleontology. Our house we have cabinets all over the place and knick-knack shelves full of minerals and meteorites, Dolores' meteorites, and fossils as well. Fossils going back way before the dinosaurs.
Now, do you go out hunting for these things, or are they purchased?
I used to, but I've had both knees replaced and both shoulders rebuilt from accidents.
Ugh.
And both hands had to be rebuilt from carpal tunnel. I had carpal tunnel to the point where I could only use my little fingers at one point. So, since that's happened, I'm not really good on the trail. But, like I say, I've got half a garage full of fossils that all need prep work. So I'm not looking for things to do.
Good.
And I've also got about a dozen bonsai trees, and I run a local bonsai workshop group.
Really?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing something like that?
35 years.
What got you interested in bonsai?
Well, how did I get interested in that? I just kind of liked the idea of the little trees. I came from an area that was very forested in Michigan. I grew up in the forest. I was out there every day as a kid. And I kind of missed the trees, and this was a way to bring them into my home.
So Mr. Miyagi with the bonsai trees he did in the Karate Kid movies had nothing to do with it?
That cracked me up. I like his advice that you make a bonsai tree by cutting away everything that doesn't look like a bonsai tree.
That's funny. Now, do you have any hidden talents that you'd like to share?
Okay, I play keyboards.
Really?
In Detroit, when I was growing up as a teenager, I played in honky tonks. I played ragtime and jazz with the Detroit Hot Jazz Society and Mother's Boys, which used to be a band in Detroit. Perhaps my favorite time playing as a sit-in with them was in a boat on the Detroit River called the HFS Major Wilcox.
Huh.
And they had a piano on the boat, and the whole band would get on the boat, and we'd go up and down the Detroit River playing music. Otherwise, it would be like Shakey's Pizza Parlors and things like that around Detroit. And I did that growing up as a kid, and then I stopped playing, about the time I got married.
Yeah.
There were other things to do then. And one day the church I'm at just said, is there anybody who can play an instrument? And I raised my hand knowing I hadn't played in 30 years. And I took off from there. And now I actually put the ragtime and jazz into the hymns.
Really?
Yeah. We have a fairly lively bunch of music.
Now, I recently interviewed Jupiter section, Craig McDougall.
Yeah.
Craig is a fantastic saxophone player. And the reason I know that is he played it on the podcast.
Oh.
So, do you have a keyboard handy?
I do. I don't think it would come across the computer very well.
Okay. All right. I think the ALPO in this particular band. I really do. I used to play drums.
I can actually send you, because I have recorded in the computer, MIDIs of me playing.
Do that, and I will add it to the podcast.
Okay.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great. I love it. So what right now in your life makes you excited?
Makes me excited?
Yeah, what are you excited for right now?
Oh, gosh, it changes from day to day. One of the other things I do that is fun is I take in rescue cats. The neighborhood used to have quite a few of them, and we took them all in, got them neutered, and now they're all laying around the house in various places.
Dare I ask how many?
9 right now. We lost one about 2 months ago to cancer.
Oh.
And we've got a 19-year-old right now that's kind of rolling to a stop.
Wow.
But otherwise, they are all just fine and a lot of fun to watch and be around.
That's good.
What gets me excited, I guess, is, going out the next good, clear night. Right now, we haven't had much clear weather in 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's like monsoonal season for you there.
Right, and it hasn't been very rainy, but it's been very cloudy. And I've lost many nights. Of course, I live up against the Rincon Mountains, too.
Okay.
And that means that the clouds will bump up against those mountains and hang there. And at least the monsoon clouds come in from the other side of the mountain, so they come up over the mountains and then drop down. But that's the source also of my bad seeing. I had better seeing at my last house, which was in between mountain ranges down in the flats. and you'd get nice laminar flow of air. Where I am right now, cold air slides off the mountain about an hour to 2 hours after sunset. And you can imagine what that does to the scene.
Wow. Wow. So is there any additional information you'd like to share with us about yourself or experiences you had?
I have no arrests on my record.
On your record, okay.
Actually, I was arrested once in 1972 in Chicago, but that's not a crime in Cook County. Really, that's I've shared an awful lot. As you can see, my days are very full.
Yeah.
They say that's how you live a long time when you're retired, is by staying busy. And if that's true, then I'm gonna top 100.
Love it.
Because I'm always doing stuff, always going. And so is Dolores. She's the same way.
That's good. I like to have something to look forward to. That's the way I am. I always got something.
Absolutely.
I know what I'm going to be doing in a year. It's just like I like that. Cool. Now I have a series of 10 questions I ask all the people for this member profile. So you ready to go through them?
Can I take the fifth?
First question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you?
How weird am I? I don't, 5, 6.
5, 6? Okay.
I think anybody that stares at little points of light in the night sky, okay. Or I look at things on the moon that are billions of years, or I look at things in my garage that are billions of years old. So, that probably qualifies me as weird on a societal scale.
Yeah. It's probably higher than a 5 or 6. So. All right. What's the furthest you have traveled for an astronomy event?
For an astronomy event? Mm-hmm. Half a planet. When I worked occultations, they were occultations of small bodies like Titan passing in front of a star or Triton passing in front of a star. We would measure atmospheric scale heights and things like that on these bodies. And so that meant chasing these events, which are like real skinny eclipse tracks on the surface of the Earth. And the farthest one I ever did was probably Madeira Island off the coast of Morocco.
And what was that for?
I can't remember if it was Triton or Titania or something like that.
So these are moons of planets.
What's that? Yeah, moons of planets. It was small body occultations.
Tiny points of light anyway.
Yeah.
And as they're in orbit around the planet, they're going to pass in front of a star.
Right. And you use a star like a standard candle because it's essentially a zero dimensional source, and the light of the star passes through the atmosphere of that body, and you can measure to a very fine level of detail the layers in that atmosphere. Wow. That was an interesting trip also because on the way back, I told my principal investigator I was going to stop for 5 days in London because I'd never seen London. And my first day in London was 9/11.
So how many days do you end up having to stay in London?
My plane was the first one to leave Heathrow on time about a week later. Wow. They closed all the offices and everything, so I wasn't able to find that out till I got to Heathrow. And I just took a couple of really good thick books with me, and they were very good. They closed off the parking garage. They were feeding us. They were giving us stuff to drink. We had comfortable areas to sit and just wait. And it was quite a time. It was quite an adventure.
That's wild. That's probably the most obscure astronomical event anybody on this podcast has talked about doing. But it's interesting too, the work you could have done with that. Did you use photometry? Is that how you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did. We used CCD photometry. There was another one we did where the track was going to go through Australia, and we had sent our C-14s. We used portable C-14s then. We had sent the C-14s on to Australia, and we were all set to go and observe this from the northern limit in Australia. And at the last minute, the refined prediction for the occultation, these things get refined all the time, and it put the occultation up in New Guinea, and we didn't have our shots for New Guinea. We didn't have our passports for New Guinea. So we told them, to the people in Australia, send the equipment back. We'll get it when we get over this. And we found, and I plotted the track on a world map, and I found that the northern limit passed through Brownsville, Texas. And
Really?
our passports were good there.
I hope so.
And so Bill Hubbard, who was the principal investigator, he had an ancestral ranch in Marfa, Texas. So we drove to Marfa with all the equipment, stayed there the one night, and then drove down to Brownsville, Texas, and we got good data down there. In fact, that was a rather unusual thing. When we were setting up the C-14s, I looked through the eyepiece. I put it on Antares, looked through the eyepiece. I saw 2 stars, and I thought, oh, no, the corrector's cracked. And I ran around to the front of the telescope and looked, and no, it was all right. It turns out I was separating Antares by so much you could have put a truck between the two elements of that star. I'd never seen it like that before or since.
Wow. That's good seeing.
Amazingly steady atmosphere there.
Wow.
So that's one thing Brownsville's got going for it.
Yeah. What's your go-to food order at your favorite hometown restaurant?
Oh, that's a touchy subject. Well, it's touchy because, number one, I'm a diabetic. Number two, in the last year, I've been diagnosed with pretty strong lactose intolerance.
Oh, no.
So pizza was my biggie, but I can't have pizza anymore. Well, not pizza that you would call pizza. I have to have vegan cheese on it and stuff. So, probably the good old fried chicken.
Yeah? Is there a particular restaurant?
Churches.
Ah, really?
Yeah. Churches makes and that comes from a boy. I worked at 10 Mile and I-696 when I was in high school at the Kentucky Fried Chicken there. And I'll tell you, me switching over to Churches is a big move.
I hear you. So what is your most memorable astronomical event?
Oh, gosh. The eclipse last year was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Or not last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We were up in Casper, Wyoming for that.
Oh.
The eclipse in 1979 in Minot, North Dakota was another good one. Those rank pretty high.
Yeah. How many total solar eclipses have you seen?
I don't know. I never stopped to count them.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 best ones for sure. And I've seen a lot of annulars. I've been on solar eclipse trips where we went to the northern or southern limit of an annular to get the Bailey's beads along the limb for the International Occultation Timing Association.
Right.
So, it's hard for me to say how many of them I'm seeing. However, the exciting thing for me is not what I've seen, but what's coming up.
Right.
In 2023, there's an eclipse that passes through a town to the west of San Antonio, Texas. And I'm going to see if I can look that up here while we're talking. And that eclipse will pass from west to east, I believe it is. And yes, it looks like it's from west to east. And that eclipse will pass through Vanderpool, Texas. 6 months later, that's on October 14th. 6 months later, a total eclipse will pass south to north through the same town of Vanderpool, Texas.
That's pretty cool.
I'm standing in the same spot for both eclipses. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Very nice. Yeah, the 2024 eclipse is going to be incredible.
2023 and 2024.
No, 2024, that's a partial?
2024 is the total. 2023 is the annular.
Oh, okay. I like annular eclipses too. They're interesting. Yeah.
Now but you say that, and that brings up another one. There was an annular eclipse I think it was 91 January. 1990 in September, we were out fossil hunting, and we were in a lot of wind, and the whole family got, the next week, got valley fever.
Oh.
And mine got deeper and deeper into my lungs until it turned into pneumonia. So I had valley fever and pneumonia concurrently. I was very sick for about 2 months. And I knew in January this annular eclipse was coming up, and I wanted to duplicate a photograph by Roger Tuthill that was in Sky and Telescope, back in the 60s, where he got the setting sun in a total annular eclipse. So it was this oblate ring.
Uh-huh.
And I went to California. We were, I think it was Encino or somewhere. It was right on the beach. And we got it. I had just gotten well in time for that. I was barely healthy again. And we went to that eclipse and saw that oblate sun setting over the ocean. It was an exciting view. And I need to digitize those images because you won't see an oval ring that often.
Yeah. That's interesting. Now, are there books that inspired you along the way?
Oh, gosh, yes. My first sky book, well, of course, the Herbert, or what was it, Herbert Zinn?
Mm-hmm.
Stars.
Stars, yep.
Yeah, that was the very first one. It's useless. The first one was Alcott and Mayall, Field Book of the Skies.
Okay.
I spent many nights in the 1960s, first half of the 1960s, looking up the constellations with that book.
I think that was in my library as well, yeah.
And I had a bunch of Patrick Moore books that I spent my lawn mowing money on. And that's a story, too, because I was on Kitt Peak, and they didn't like necessarily dealing with figures on TV and stuff like that would come to the mountain and want to film. So they said to me one time, Patrick Moore's coming here with his entourage from England. Do you want to act as their host? I said, oh, my gosh, yes, absolutely. And so I got all my Patrick Moore's books, and there's about a dozen of them. And I put them on the table open to the front page. And I had them all stacked on top of each other. And after we got done filming over at the solar telescope, that very angular solar telescope on Kitt Peak, and we went back to the Schmidt, that little house next to the dome where I worked. And I opened the door and I said, I'd like to ask you a favor. And he saw the stack of books. He says, absolutely. And he sat down. He signed every one of them.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was great. So, yeah, those books were very inspirational to me. And, in fact, his lunar book, I still do quote from time to time to show the things we have learned, how we've advanced in our knowledge of the moon. I'll show something from his book and something from Chuck Wood's latest book, and I'll compare them and things like that. And this is in the articles I put on Facebook. Mm-hmm. I'm also regularly publishing articles on Sacred Space Astronomy, which is the Vatican website.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So that's Sacred Space Astronomy if you want to see those.
Yeah. All right. If you were stranded on a dark sky, deserted island, what telescope would you want with you?
Oh, I could bring one with me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that 8-inch of mine.
There you go. That's what I figured. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you were stranded on a dark sky, deserted island, what music would you want with you?
Gosh, I'm so eclectic in my music tastes. Normally, I have Baroque playing around the house, but I'm very fond of what's called space music, and we have several of the more famous space music composers here in Tucson, Steve Roach being one of them. I really like his music. He's one of these people where I can buy his album without having heard anything off of it, and I know I'll enjoy it.
Really?
John Surrey is another one. He's in the Atlanta area. Real nice guy. I got to know him during a Peach State stargaze. And he just composes some of the most beautiful stuff. So yeah, it's very hard to say.
Okay. Space music, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
It's good for observing. It's good for contemplating.
What advice would you give the 12-year-old you?
Get better grades.
Ah.
My life would have been easier.
Yeah.
I tried to pull the same class clown thing that I did in high school. I tried to pull that in the Navy. I got called into the CEO's office. And he looked at me. He says, I've got your grades, your test scores here, and I got your grades here, and they don't match. He says, here's the deal. You're going to make them match. You're going to bring up those grades to match the test scores, or we're going to give you this little radar. It's about 18 inches cube. We're going to give you this little radar and a parachute, and you're going to go count people on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and there's no retirement package for that program. And he knew how to motivate me. The next week, my grades went up.
Oh, my. Yeah, fear is a good motivator.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. All right, here's a tough one. Ready?
Yeah.
Cake or pie?
Pie, no question.
What kind?
Dolores's sugar-free apple pie.
You got to get the points in there. Dolores's sugar-free apple pie.
No, she spent years putting this recipe together.
Really?
And tweaking it. And it's better than ordinary sugar apple pies.
Okay. Is it?
I've been trying to get her to, we have a town nearby where they harvest apples. It's called Wilcox.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a big apple pie contest every year. And I've been trying to get her to enter because she'll win it hands down. No question.
Now, are the apples on the top or is it covered like with a crust?
Crumble top. It's a crumble top.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I like that. That's
yeah.
my favorite type.
Yeah. And I used to be able to have it a la mode, but I can't do that anymore.
Yeah. There's
sugar and dairy in one.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could do yogurt or something, couldn't it? Or,
oh, yeah. No, yogurt just as bad as dairy.
It?
Yeah.
All right. Who has had the most single influence on you in astronomy?
In astronomy, single influence. Walter's up there. Patrick Moore's up there. I knew them both very well. But, I'd have to say Dr. Peter Pesch.
Who is Dr. Peter Pesch?
He was the director of Case Western Reserve's astronomy department, the fellow who hired me from Michigan to come out and run the Schmidt on Kitt Peak. That was my big break in astronomy. Otherwise, I would have retired from being an optician. I was an optician when I was living in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I built everything from eyeglasses, which pays the bills, right on up to large optics, an 18-inch telescope.
So he's the guy that saw something in you and gave you the break.
Well, the ad ran in Sky and Telescope, and my wife saw it. Dolores said, why don't you apply for it? I said, because I got about a snowball's chance in an oven of making it. And she said, well, you don't know unless you try. And I said, yeah, you got a point. So I went and I applied for it, and sure enough, a few months later, I got hired. And that was a huge sea change in our life.
Gave you all the confidence in the world, too.
No, when you get out there and see, I quit in my college when I was going to college. I had to quit my senior year because Dolores got pregnant. I was working 2 weeks a month on Kitt Peak, and there was no way to keep up with the classes.
Okay.
And so I had to quit and take care of the family. And that, when you know you're operating from that standpoint and you're working around all these PhDs, your confidence is should be a little touchy.
That's true. Yeah. Well, Rick, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh my gosh, I've shared so much now. Would you like my Social Security number?
No, we'll hold that for the next time.
Okay.
Now, how can everybody get a hold of you if they want to contact you?
Facebook is the excellent way. Any of the ALPO contacts are good. My email address is on the ALPO website. And then there's the Solar Section email list. Although I don't check into that as much as I probably should. I watch Facebook more.
Okay. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun, Rick.
Sure was. Thank you very much.
All right. You take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook. I again want to thank Rik Hill for coming on the podcast and giving us a little insight into who he is and what got him into this great hobby of ours. And stay tuned till after I have these closing remarks. There's a couple little files he sent me of him playing the organ. Actually, all the instruments on these. It's pretty wild. I hope you enjoy it. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. It brings a lot more people to the podcast, and it gives us a note. You can also listen on iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you will receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I want to thank the producer of this podcast, Steve Siedentop, for his generous support of the Observer's Notebook. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. You can contact me via email at commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at ObserversNBpod. Until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening. And now, some music with Rik Hill.